At first glance, Andrea Higgins' works appear to be completely abstract, color field paintings in the tradition of painters like Frank Stella. A closer look reveals another level of meaning.
The President's Wives is a series of paintings that she's done since 2001. And it's a series of portraits of First Ladies. Some of the paintings are actually based on very specific photographs. For instance, the Laura Bush painting and the Hillary painting is based on a photograph of the two First Ladies. And during that photo op, Hillary was, of course, wearing a black suit, and Laura was wearing this purple kind of tweed suit. Part of their, amazing appeal and dynamism is that they are completely abstract paintings, but they really do render the individual identities of each one of these people.
Andrea was formally trained as a painter at Dartmouth, Yale, and the San Francisco Art Institute. But she's been fascinated by fabric since childhood, when her grandmother brought her along on shopping trips to San Francisco's Britex fabric store.
Why I love coming to the store in general, it's like a candy store or something, is that this whole idea of fabric and decorative arts versus painting, and what has always interested me is fabric is a decorative art, technically. And this idea that you weave threads together to make something you can wear or cover a table or wrap your baby in, or in the most utilitarian way in every culture. But then you don't have to make a pattern. But then throughout the world, there's been this interest in aestheticizing fabric. Fabric, it's part of your everyday world. It's on your sofa, you wear it every day. It seems to be part of everyone's visual world. There are plenty of people who don't care about art, don't know anything about it, and don't go to museums. Whereas everybody has to deal with fabric.
Andrea is now at work on another in her series of First Lady portraits. This one based on a gown worn by Betty Ford at her inauguration, a gown covered with embroidered roses.
See, this is what's interesting in terms of thinking about my piece that's going to incorporate embroidery, is this whole idea of how you stitch an image or a form to create. There's a gazillion ways they could create this, whatever form you call it. You can make big stitches or little stitches, diagonal, but there's always this inherent pattern in the way it's stitched to create a solid color.
The creative impetus for Andrea's series of First Lady paintings came from a trip to Indonesia, where she was once again drawn to the world of textiles.
I was particularly struck by the amount of time and thought that went into dressing the women, or women dressing themselves for a temple, going to a Hindu temple and thinking that their clothes would help to attract the attention of the gods, and thus I thought of it as the ultimate power dressing, that their clothes could beautify and aestheticize themselves enough to make the difference to get one of the gods to come to them and occupy them. And I thought, I love the parallel between that and First Ladies, in that whether a First Lady like Nancy Reagan, who always cared about fashion, or a First Lady like Laura Bush, who's openly stated she doesn't care much about clothes, they don't really have a choice that it's meaningful to the public. By default, a First Lady has to take time or spend energy thinking about how they're projecting an image for themselves. They're not attracting the gods, but they're attracting the constituency, so it's very similar to me. And so a president, maybe someone comments about their tie, but it's once again the women that people scrutinize with great attention.
Like many contemporary painters now working in a world of digital image processing, Andrea often felt defensive about her choice of medium, a handicraft that has changed little in 500 years. Her trip to Indonesia changed all that.
Being there and watching these people weave, I mean, as well as paint, but weave is what really struck me. Just a sense that time was no issue. There was just this, the way you spent your day was weaving. You didn't have to justify your time. You didn't have to think about productivity all the time. You didn't have to think about the outcome or where you're going or what your progress, I mean, all of that. And I had so few obligations other than to paint that suddenly I realized how committed I was to my craft, being painting, and why I can't necessarily justify it purely verbally. You know, I tried other mediums in grad school and realized this is really what I'm meant to do. I mean, I really believe in this tradition and this craft. And so thinking of these women weaving and thinking of myself, putting myself in their shoes and painting and thinking, I'm not going to worry about time.
Each of Andrea's paintings takes months to complete, and the process of building up the layers of paint on the canvas is as painstaking as the weaving it emulates.
I've always liked work that is an accumulation of marks that is sort of, instead of a grand gesture or sort of this, I don't work in a way that's just this intuitive, like the abstract expressionist thought, divine inspiration or whatnot. I don't think that way, so I like the idea of by hand building up something that has the element of time in it and has this sort of repetitive, the process is repetitive, thus the final outcome has this sort of repetitive element. And the adjustments, it's sort of like, you know, I can look at these individual colors and say, this feels about right, but not until the whole thing's covered do I really know if it's right and if it needs, and it's not just that the color's wrong and that's why I'm making another layer. It's like getting all the combinations makes the complexity of the color and the richness of a fabric type of feel.
Unlike the weaving circles in Indonesia that originally inspired her, Andrea's work is a solitary endeavor as she works up to 8 hours a day alone in her studio.
It's one of those things where if I'm in a good state of mind, like if I don't feel well, it's a sort of a disaster because it just all goes sort of negative. But for the most part, it's just getting in the zone. If I get in a rhythm and I get going, I can go hours without knowing time passes, so luckily. But I wouldn't do this if it was torturous, obviously, because no one's asking me to do it. So somehow, this is fun.